this one is really just around the importance of continuing professional development and learning. And I just wanted to start off with a bit of a quote, actually, from Einstein, who said, "Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think." And I was quite taken by this quote, because I think if ever there was a time for us to sort of reevaluate and think about what we're doing and how we're doing things as leaders, it's probably now, given the kind of scale and kind of sort of range of events that are sort of whirling around us. So given that we've got a bit of a chance to pause and reflect, I would suggest sort of now is probably a great time to seize the moment and really think about what you're doing to support your own professional and personal growth and development. So what I want to do was just talk through, I guess, a range of different steps, and just offer some sort of advice around how you might be able kind of to do that, and put some thinking behind it, some structure around it, and some opportunity to think about, you know, evaluating it once you've started on the process. But just before I go into that, I thought it might be helpful to think about what continuing professional development is, I guess, and it's something I think we should all be responsible for and committed to, because it has huge benefits, and I think you know, there are a range of those, which I'm sure you're probably all alert to. It helps us enhance our skills, ensures our capabilities are current and keeps pace with challenges and demands in our professional lives and the wider sort of environment that we're working in. And obviously now there's some unprecedented challenges and kind of priorities that we all are going to have to reorient around. It obviously also helps us enhance our ability to deliver more, I think, for our clients, our customers, our service users, our beneficiaries. And I think by doing that and aligning our skills around being able to better serve our customers in whatever sphere we're working on, it also leads to giving us a bit of a competitive advantage. It keeps us in tune with changes in our markets. Clearly nothing is static, things continue to evolve and change. And personally, it clearly helps you advance your career if that's where you're kind of wanting to take yourself, and distinguishes and differentiates you. And also, I think, kind of more broadly, it opens up new possibilities, new knowledge and skills, and keeps us sort of motivated and engaged with what we're doing. And I think overall, and perhaps as importantly and as fundamental, it kind of increases our confidence, it supports our overall well-being, and I guess, again, just relating to the current context we're working on, we're working in and we're all living in at the moment, we could all do with some of that, I guess. So as I said, today I just wanted to focus on a couple of areas, really, a couple of steps I think might be helpful if you haven't already been doing this, to sort of bring into your kind of world, if you like, to get into the habit of committing to and developing yourself, your skills, your experience areas, and the qualities that you want to improve upon. So I guess that the first step, I think always, is just to do that sort of honest evaluation and assessment of your skills, understand where your core strengths are, what are your priorities for development. So this can be your own self-reflection, assessing kind of yourself, where you think you are. It could be through using psychometric assessment, potentially, seeking feedback from colleagues, your peers, working with your appraisal process. And so I suppose sort of seeking insight from a variety of different perspectives. I think it's also useful just to reevaluate and think about your values, what motivates you, what drives you, and just getting at it from a sort of a range of different perspectives, really, to give you that broader insight. And then I think it's useful to think about your longer term leadership goals and the leadership qualities you want to improve. As we said in the blurb around this, it's starting, I suppose, with the end in mind, thinking about where you want to be, and then kind of working back from that. And thinking, I guess, as we're all perhaps in environments where we're creating social impact, is thinking about what's the impact that you want to have. So by asking these sort of range of questions, you can see where you're currently standing, but importantly where you want to arrive in terms of sort of your goals and objectives. And importantly, you're committing to setting a direction of travel, and I think personally taking charge of driving that agenda. So that would be kind of one of the first things that I would always sort of recommend doing, and I'm sure some of you already started doing that or indeed doing that, but that's really important to create that sort of foundation. The second step is around really putting some kind of action plan in place to address some of the key areas that you've identified that you want to enhance, you want to improve on, you want to develop, and then create some kind of time frame around when you might expect to complete that task. You know, the old adage of SMART objectives, you know, kind of probably pretty fundamental. We all kind of know what they are. It works. Put a time frame around it, understand what you want to achieve by when, and understand how you're going to do it. And think about also the things that might act as a bit of an impediment or blocker to you being able to achieve that goal. So, you know, it's not only about where you want to, what are the things that might sort of derail you as well. So just understand a bit of that and how you might mitigate that and overcome some of the kind of risks to that. The other thing that I think is always helpful just to think about is about applying a sort of return on investment principle, if you like, in terms of what you want to get out of this investment. So, for example, it could be about being better equipped to deal with some of the challenges in your current role. It could be about working towards a promotion or moving to a different or more senior kind of role. It could be about kind of changing sectors, transferring to something sort of new. So think about that. Think about the kind of things you want to achieve. It's good also, I think, to think about this from a variety of viewpoints, you know, in terms of what is going to work practically for you alongside doing a day job, which, you know, if you're in a senior kind of position, often it's, you know, pretty demanding. Think also about what your learning style is. You know, are you better in a classroom setting, or do you think, you know, you benefit more from facilitated learning? And thinking about how you like to engage and learn is as important as what that kind of sort of learning kind of methodology is, if you like. So I think when we're thinking about the range of different elements of continuing professional development, there are obviously a sort of a range of different choices that one can make. Forgive me if I'm sort of telling you things that you might already know, but I thought it might just be helpful to go through and just think about some of the kind of maybe more formal and informal learning and kind of training and support that we can sort of find for ourselves. So I guess in terms of the formal approaches, obviously sort of training is one area, and clearly often that's directed towards improving a particular skill. Maybe it could be around financial management, improving your IT kind of skills and knowledge. Training is very well directed in regards to that particular area, sort of technical sort of understanding, if you like. There are obviously seminars, conferences that we can sort of engage in and go on, broader workshops and events. But clearly there's also more formal learning, such as sort of postgraduate courses, MBAs. Some of you, I'm sure, will be aware of CAS, the Centre for Charity Effectiveness. There are MBAs at Cranfield, Henley, that I know some of my clients have been on and found really useful. And there are quite a lot of business schools now forging links to the charity sector. So Nottingham Business School runs an MBA in corporate social responsibility and offers scholarships for charity and not-for-profit leaders. Obviously, the CLAW Leadership Programme is a really good programme as well. So look into and investigate possibilities around that if you wanted more structured and more longer term sort of learning kind of intervention to really address some of those leadership skills more holistically. There are also sort of lectures as well, and that falls into sort of perhaps more of the category around seminars and conferences as well. And then the other area, which I think is always a really helpful kind of route to self-improvement and self-reflection and facilitated learning, is around getting a coach or a mentor. Now, there are distinct differences. I mean, there are parallels, but there are distinct differences between coaches and mentors, but they can play a really critical role in supporting your leadership development. I think a coach is more of acting as an enabler and facilitator to support self-discovery. A mentor is often somebody who's been in your industry, has got maybe a broader range of skills and more senior to yourself, and can offer, I guess, some of that sort of experience in terms of advice and guidance. It's perhaps more directed and more relevant to your specific kind of sector, and you're reaping, I guess, the benefits of that individual's experience and using them as a bit of a sounding board. I think a coach is more around sort of supporting you to arrive at your own kind of sort of conclusions and addressing some of your own challenges and working your way through those to enable you to sort of grow as a leader. But either one can be kind of sort of helpful, and of course you could have both. Somebody could be one and the same potentially. I mean, in terms of finding a coach, often I'd recommend using your network, getting some recommendations. The sort of relationship with a coach and you feeling comfortable and content to work with that individual is really important. So in terms of investigating the possibilities of that, you know, do your due diligence, get some recommendations, maybe meet one or two people, and before you then sort of kind of opt for a particular individual. The ILM, CIPD will have kind of reference points, and there's also a life coaching kind of directory which you can access online, and I can send some links around that afterwards if that's helpful. But often a really good way of finding it is through sort of recommendations and using your networks. The other aspects of more sort of formal CPD are action learning sets, and I don't know whether any of you have been involved in those. I'm sure some of you have been, but they're a more structured methods sort of enabling smaller groups to address particular workplace issues by meeting regularly. It's often sort of a peer-to-peer support kind of group, people with a similar level of responsibility and experience, and usually meet fairly regularly to address practical ways to address real life situations, essentially. And it's again geared more towards finding your own solutions, but using the benefit of sort of questioning, interrogating a particular issue or challenge to arrive at a particular conclusion. And I must admit, I'm sort of relatively new to action learning sets, but I found them really helpful, and having that sort of peer-to-peer support is a hugely kind of beneficial way of sort of learning and growing, and again sort of reaping the benefit of people's experience and helping you arrive at a conclusion yourself. Working something through is hugely helpful. So those are the sort of range of sort of some of the formal development kind of areas you could look into. There's obviously a lot of informal CPD that goes on day to day, and some of it we might not be aware of, but the things that I would be thinking about would be you know, looking at reference points, publications that are industry specific, reading sort of case studies, kind of articles. I'm sure some of this you're doing. You know, learning in the job itself or in the context you're working in, and that could be just about taking yourself out of your, I suppose, specific sphere of responsibility and getting involved in other things within your organisation to develop and extend your learning and your skills where practicable and where possible, and clearly where relevant. Networking, really important. I talked a bit about this on the last webinar. And one of the things that I talked about in terms of kind of networks, and again, this is all dependent on what you want to achieve and what your objectives are, but clearly it's about your own networks, but equally it's also about when you're wanting to learn and extend your experience. Often it's about moving beyond your current network, which can often be a little bit restricting because they know you, they kind of know where you're at. They're a reference point that's probably a bit too familiar. So it's about extending and broadening your networks to, again, sort of reach out and get different sort of insights to develop in whatever way you set your sights on. Podcasts are brilliant. Following sort of industry specific podcasts, I'm sure you're all kind of engaging with those. And then the other thing to think about is volunteering and trusteeship. I know some of you have probably had trustee roles, but again, that's a really good way of maybe putting yourself in a charity or organisation that's not perhaps as familiar to you in terms of sort of your particular sector experience, but being in a different environment, you know, a governance role, seeing it from the other side of the fence, again, extending your experience and skills. So I'm sure some of those areas that I've covered you're familiar with, but there's a sort of a wide range of options that you can choose. Some of those are sort of, you know, much more obvious than others, but I think important to sort of bring in a range of different sort of interventions to support you. I guess my final sort of point around, I suppose, sort of step three, and it's always useful to have sort of three things because you remember three things, is once you're underway, you need to keep track of what you're doing and almost sort of develop a bit of a professional portfolio, a sort of personal record, if you like, of the activities that you've done, and as importantly, the I suppose that the value that you've got from them. So, for example, what has the scope of your learning been, and what's the relevance and impact that it's had on your day-to-day work? How has it enhanced your ability, for example, to deliver better value for your clients or service users, your team, working more effectively with your colleagues, for example. It could be also around what impact it's had on you personally. I'm going back to my earlier point around improving confidence, well-being, feeling more motivated, getting a greater sense of satisfaction and achievements, which is as important as anything, and also just reflect around what you found more challenging, what hasn't maybe kind of sort of worked for you, and shift and reorient. Back to the point I made earlier about sort of return on investment. If something you've kind of tried really hasn't had the desired effect, what is it you need to do in terms of trying a different approach? And also get feedback on your performance or on aspects that you're looking to improve from either sort of colleagues or your manager or kind of peers. You know, what have people seen a change in terms of sort of how you're working? I think it's also important to keep a record of reflections on your learning, and I think by doing this, it sort of, I guess, acts as a bit of a reinforcement around the progress that you're making. And then, as I said, if things haven't quite worked, you haven't seen kind of progress in a particular area that you were hoping to see, make some adjustments. You know, do more of something that's working, do less of something that isn't. That seems obvious, but I think see it as a sort of a flexible and a fluid plan that needs to continue to evolve. You know, just going back to sort of the earlier point around this being around continuous professional development, there's probably not a finite point at which you think, okay, my job is done, but it's a process of discovery, and I think that's the sort of exciting thing about all of this, is that it continues to inform your kind of approach and inform the way you're doing things, and as you do continue to learn, you may uncover sort of new things. So important just to sort of keep that reference point and continue to sort of reevaluate and adjust. So those are the 3 points. Those are the areas I wanted to cover. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, yeah, Reach is a good site. NCVO have a good site. Obviously, The Guardian has a lot of opportunities. Third Sector as a publication, and Akivo actually is they have their own jobs board too. So there are lots of places to go and access trustee opportunities, and as you say, sort of organisations like Peridot. And if there's something in particular that you're interested in, maybe we can have a conversation offline and we can talk in a bit more detail. But I think just, I guess, before kind of, you know, accessing opportunity, it's sort of useful to think about what sort of cause interests you, what area, what type of organisation would be an organisation that would motivate you, and where you want to bring your skills to make an impact. And I think that's sort of a good starting point, just to understand that first, and then, you know, think about kind of where your skills clearly match what they're looking for. That's an obvious thing to say, I know, but I think kind of starting with a cause that really motivates you, you can then, I think, be much more authentic about your motivation and interest, and that's as important as the skill set you're bringing. But I think the other thing, if you are interested in a particular area, you may or may not be, but I think kind of starting with that point, you can often kind of just look at those charities, those organisations that interest you, and then reach out to that organisation. Often people will be thinking about kind of bringing trustees on as you know, others come off the board, and actually having you in mind is really helpful. So don't hesitate in terms of reaching out. If there's a particular organisation that interests you, you'd like to bring your skills, write to them and say, you know, I'd be really interested when an opportunity arises to be considered as well. So you can also be preemptive as well as responsive. I think probably the first thing to say is that if you've got a kind of a network and a group of people that you think might be kind of sort of helpful to exchange ideas, you can create one. You don't necessarily need to go somewhere to kind of access a group, although clearly you can. But I would say maybe in the current circumstances we're in, I know some of my clients and some of my candidates are starting to sort of create their own, so you can always do that. I think it's important though to have someone who can facilitate, to keep the conversation on track, and I guess to keep a sort of a degree of kind of structure to it. So if you can find someone to support you in that endeavour, I think that's helpful. But you know, there's no reason why you can't create something yourself to address that sort of kind of particular you know, issue or kind of sort of challenge. There is also, I've not engaged with them, but I know a facilitator that's been in a group that I've been involved, uses an organisation called Action Learning Associates.co.uk. I can sort of share the link with you, and they sort of help bring people together and kind of sort of provide access to sort of groups across a range of different sectors. So that might become an area to look at. As you say, Akivo is a good source of information, and again, sort of engaging with their networks and some of their particular, they have special interest groups actually, and I know a couple of people I've been speaking to recently again who are involved in those special interest groups. I mean, you have to be a member of Akivo, but you know, again, they've sort of split off and sort of created their own. So my advice in the current sort of situation is think about who's in your network and maybe create your own. There's no reason you can't do that.